Most people will never find their purpose. And for the most part, most of them are fine. Functioning, comfortable enough, going to work, coming home, watching something, sleeping, and doing it again. Not miserable, not fulfilled, just moving through it. Whether that's a tragedy is the wrong question. The right question is whether you're watching this because some part of you already suspects you're one of them, and you're hoping this is the video that changes that. You haven't found your purpose because you've been asking the wrong question. Not because you haven't tried hard enough or found the right book or done enough journaling. The wrong question, asked with complete sincerity for 20 years, still gets you nowhere. By the end of this, you'll have the right question, something that actually works for answering it, and a warning about what happens to people who find their purpose and let it eat them alive. You don't have a purpose problem, you have an honesty problem. Most people who say they can't find their purpose aren't looking. They're performing the search, reading about purpose, talking about purpose, watching videos about purpose, which is a convincing simulation of actually searching without any of the risk that real searching involves. Real searching means trying things without failing. Real searching means trying things and failing at them. What Real searching means trying things and failing at them where other people can see. It means saying out loud what you actually want, not what sounds good, not what your parents would approve of, not what makes you interesting at a dinner party, what you actually want. Most people would rather stay confused than do that. Confusion is safe. It doesn't require committing to anything, which means you can never be judged for failing to deliver on a commitment you never made. Carl Jung had a name for this: the persona, the version of you that's built for public consumption, the thing that goes to work, posts online, makes the right noises at the right moments, and steers hard away from anything that might reveal the gap between the performance and what's actually going on underneath it. Most people live their lives in this persona and call it personality. The problem is, purpose can't live there. It's underneath the persona, in the stuff you've been avoiding. And getting underneath it is uncomfortable enough. Getting underneath it is uncomfortable enough that most people are just performing instead, right up until they're 65 and the performance has become so automatic they forgot there was anything else. So before frameworks, before journaling, before any of the practical stuff coming later, ask yourself what you're actually afraid of. Not what you want, what you're afraid of. Because almost without exception, the thing that you're avoiding is pointing directly at the thing that matters. Fear is directional information. Most people see where it's pointing to and go the other way. The ones who end up with something worth having eventually learn to go towards it. The truth is, most people aren't even searching anymore. They've found something easier, and that thing is what's keeping them stuck. Let's talk about what you're doing instead. Not to make you feel bad, you already feel bad about it, and that's part of why you're here. But you can't replace something until you've actually named it. There's a whole category of behavior that works as a full-time substitute for purpose. It doesn't feel like avoidance from the inside. It feels like winding down, treating yourself, taking the edge off, being social. It feels like rest. It isn't rest. Real rest comes after real effort, and this stuff comes instead of it. There's a difference between someone who has worked all day and is now recovering, and someone who has avoided effort entirely and is now avoiding that too. Both look the same. Both almost feel the same. But that's what makes the second version so easy to keep doing indefinitely. Let's talk about gaming, for example. Gaming itself isn't the problem. There are people who play games and have full lives with direction and effort, and they play games and it's fine. You probably know one. The problem is gaming as a primary identity. Gaming is the thing you do with every hour that isn't accounted for. Gaming is the only place in your life where you experience competence, progress, mastery, and connection, because those things don't exist anywhere else in your week, and this is your one reliable source for them. That's not a hobby, that's a prosthetic, and the prosthetic is doing the job purpose is supposed to be doing, and doing it badly. And it never actually closes the gap no matter how many hours you go in. But you already know this. The session ends and the feeling doesn't stay. Drinking and substances are the same thing, running faster with worse consequences. Nobody picks up these vices because they're thriving. They pick it up because something is unaddressed. Anxiety, boredom, a life that doesn't make sense, a conversation with themselves they're not ready to have. And alcohol, or whatever else it is, reliably interrupts that conversation before it gets anywhere. It's not weakness, it's actually kind of rational for about 6 months. Then the short term starts compounding. A year of interrupted conversations is a year of nothing being resolved, plus the cost of the interruption. The thing you were avoiding is still there, now a bit bigger, and you're a bit less able to deal with it than you were. All of these things have one thing in common, and it's directly relevant to the purpose question. They all deliver something purpose delivers: stimulation, progress, relief, identity, connection, without any of the cost that makes those things real. Purpose requires sacrifice, risk, failure, skin in the game. The substitutes give you the feeling, but without the requirement. And the brain, which has no natural preference for meaning over comfort, will pick the cheaper version every single time you give it the option. You have to stop giving it the option. Not permanently, just enough to stop filling every available hour with something that was never going to do the job. But none of this started with the gaming, or the drinking, or the scrolling. It started way earlier than that. Someone told you about passion, and they were completely wrong. Someone told you to follow your passion. A teacher, probably. A commencement speech. A book with a sunset on the cover that your aunt gave to you. Whoever it was wrong. Not with bad intentions, just wrong. The problem with follow your passion as advice is that it assumes that the passion is already there, fully formed and waiting, like a dog that knows where you're going and you just have to hold the leash. But maybe about 4% of people, that's actually accurate. For everyone else, passion doesn't come before the work, it comes out of it. You don't find what you love and then get good at it. You get good at something and then notice, if you're paying attention, that you love it. The sequence is backwards in almost every piece of advice on this subject, and it matters more than anything else. Friedrich Nietzsche got this in the blunt, confrontational way he got most things. What he meant by will to power wasn't domination, it was self overcoming. The ongoing process of becoming more capable than you currently are through effort, failure, and doing hard things on purpose. Purpose in that framing isn't somewhere you arrive, it's the direction you move. The person who's been moving for 10 years in a direction that's genuinely theirs has more actual purpose in a Tuesday afternoon than someone who has spent the same 10 years reading about how to find it. The other damage the passion narrative does is to people who don't immediately feel passionate about anything, which is most people. Most people aren't walking around with an obvious calling they just haven't acted on. They have vague interests, mild preferences, and a general sense that something probably matters more than what they're doing now. The passion narrative tells those people they're broken. They're not broken. They just haven't done anything yet that could turn into a passion. There's a specific reason for that, which someone identified in conditions considerably worse than yours, and it's more useful than anything on a bestseller list. To do with Nietzsche's idea is embarrassingly simple. Write down one thing you've been avoiding starting because you're not sure you'd be good at it or care about it. One thing, not a list. Then do it badly for 30 days without evaluating whether it's the right thing. That's like me with making these videos. Self-overcoming isn't something you believe in. It's something you do repeatedly. The direction shows up through the doing. 30 days of actually engaging with one hard thing will tell you more about where you should be going than a year of thinking about it. And the guy who figured out why that works didn't do it from a comfortable chair. He figured it out in a concentration camp. Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz for 3 years, lost his wife, his parents, his brother, had everything stripped from him in the most complete way imaginable. What he noticed, in himself and in the other prisoners, was that the ones who survived psychologically weren't the strongest or most resourceful. They were the ones who had something to live for, a reason, something they were holding on to that existed beyond the immediate situation. He built a whole therapeutic framework around this called logotherapy. The core idea, meaning isn't a luxury, it's a mechanism for survival. People can get through almost anything if they have a good enough answer to the question, what for? The other side of that, the part that applies to you in your comfortable apartment watching this, is that a life without meaning is its own category of suffering. Quieter. Nobody diagnoses it as a crisis. You just feel vaguely hollow and slightly irritable and keep clicking the next episode and wonder why nothing quite lands anymore. The discomfort you feel when you think about purpose isn't a symptom of something being wrong with you. It's your nervous system correctly identifying a gap between where you are and where you need to be. That's useful information. Most people kill it with entertainment, food, substances, busyness, things that work just well enough in the short run to stop them ever address the actual signal. You already know what you're using to avoid it. The question is whether you're going to keep using it. Frankl said meaning isn't given, it's found through 3 things: what you create or contribute, what you experience or love, and the attitude you choose towards unavoidable suffering. 3 doors. Most people spend their whole lives standing in front of all three of them and don't go through any. Try this. In one sitting, 20 minutes, 3 questions. What have you built, made, or contributed in the last year that you do again with no payment attached? What in your life makes time move differently? Faster because you're absorbed, or slow because you want to stay in it? Where are you currently facing something difficult, and what would it mean to actually choose your response instead of just reacting? Write these answers down. Don't analyze them, just get them on a page where you can look at them. Those 3 answers are a rough map of which door is already slightly open for you. Before you do any of that though, there's one thing that stops almost everyone right there. They need to know it'll work before they try. Camus has something to say about that. Camus believed that life is fundamentally absurd. Not tragic. Absurd. No inherent meaning in the universe. No grand plan. No cosmic purpose sitting somewhere waiting to be located. The universe is completely indifferent to your search for meaning, and the gap between how badly you need meaning and how little the universe cares about that is, in his framing, the absurd. Most people hear that and feel despair. Camus thought despair was exactly the wrong response. The answer was revolt, the internal decision to keep building meaning anyway, in full awareness that the universe doesn't care and will eventually win regardless. To live as deliberately and as fully as possible precisely because nothing is guaranteed. Push the boulder. Find something in the pushing. Why this matters practically. The biggest thing stopping most people from committing to a direction is the demand for certainty before they start. They want to know it's the right thing before they put anything into it. Want confirmation that this is the one before they sacrifice anything for it. That confirmation never comes. Waiting for it is the most efficient way to guarantee that you'll never start. Camus is useful specifically because he removes the certainty requirement. You don't have to know it's right. You need to decide it's worth attempting and then actually attempt it. The people who actually end up with something meaningful didn't have better information than you. They just picked a direction, moved in it, and were honest enough to adjust when it wasn't working. Adjusting is fine. Stopping is the problem. So take the thing from Nietzsche's step, the one thing you wrote down that you've been avoiding, and make one external commitment to it today. Not a journal entry, something outside your own head. Tell someone, sign up for something, book something, post something. It doesn't have to be big. It has to be real enough that backing out costs you something. Deciding to push the boulder does nothing. Pushing it does everything. Do something real before this video ends, because the framework I'm about to give you only works if you actually started moving. Ikigai, a Japanese concept comprising of 4 questions. What do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you get paid for? Purpose lives at the intersection of all 4. Love plus skill is a passion. Skill plus what's needed is vocation. What's needed plus what pays is a mission. All 4 overlapping is Ikigai, reason for being. It's a solid map. The problem is it assumes you already know the answers to those questions, and most people don't. So use it as a destination, not a starting point. Figure out where those circles would overlap if you had better data, then work backwards towards generating that data. Action first comes from behavioral psychology, specifically the research showing that action precedes motivation, not the other way around. You don't need to feel motivated before you act, and motivation follows the action. Same principle applied to purpose. You don't wait to feel purposeful before doing things. You do things. You notice what makes you feel awake and what makes you feel like you're already dead. You track it. Over months, not days, months, a pattern starts showing up. That pattern is information. Most people skip this because it means doing things with no guaranteed return, which is uncomfortable. It's also the only reliable way to get the raw material the other frameworks need. Identity first is the closest to what Jung was getting at. Instead of asking what should I do, ask who am I becoming? Pick an identity, not a job title, not a goal, an identity. I'm somebody who builds things. I'm somebody who solves hard problems. I create. Then make decisions from that identity. The decisions stack. The identity firms up. The purpose comes out of the identity instead of being chased separately from it. It's the fastest of the 3 but needs the most honesty. You have to actually choose an identity that's yours, not one that sounds impressive, not one your parents would want, not one that performs well online. Yours. So use action first to generate raw material. Try things. Pay attention to what makes you feel alive. Use What makes you feel most alive? Meet where you're actually good at. What actually needs doing? What can sustain you? Use identity first to commit. Stop describing yourself as someone looking for purpose and start describing yourself as someone who does the things you found. In that order. It takes longer than a weekend. It works. Every book, every course, every video on this ends right here. You found it. Great. Go live your best life. Nobody talks about what actually happens next. I'm going to, because it's the part that trips most people up. Finding your purpose is not the finish line. The whole industry around this implies that once you find it, everything resolves. But it doesn't. Purpose found and badly managed is just a different set of problems. The first thing it does is become obsession. There's a version of purposeful living that looks from the outside like a well lived life, and from the inside feels like a compulsion you can't switch off. Nietzsche is a cautionary tale here as much as a useful one. The man destroyed himself pursuing his own ideas. Will to power without any limits becomes the will to consume everything in service of the work. Relationships, health, rest, all of it gets rationalized away because the purpose is too important. And the irony is the work actually starts to suffer for it, because the person doing it has been so hollowed out of the pursuit that there's nothing actually left to bring to it. The second thing it does is collapse your whole identity onto one point. You become the thing, the entrepreneur, the artist, the athlete, all your self worth, all your sense of meaning, all the architecture of who you are stacked onto a single load bearing wall. Then the business fails, the injury happens, the work stops working, and everything comes down at once because there's no redundancy anywhere. Jung called this inflation. The ego is so identified with one archetype that it loses access to everything else that makes the person whole. The answer isn't less purpose. It's a bigger identity that contains purpose instead of being replaced by it. The third thing, the quietest one, is burnout. Not the dramatic kind. The kind that shows up after years of optimizing so hard. Third thing, the quietest one, is burnout. Not the dramatic kind, the kind that shows up after years of optimizing so hard that meaning the kind that shows up after years of optimizing so hard for meaning that you forgot to build a life around it. Frankl survived Auschwitz and built logotherapy into something that outlasted him. He also understood that meaning without recovery is just suffering with better branding. The pursuit has to be sustainable or it ends before you finish it. Purpose is something run by a person who also has to sleep, eat, maintain relationships, and occasionally do nothing in particular. If you haven't built recovery into it yet, you will eventually, either by choice or because your body makes the choice for you. You are not your purpose. You have one. That distinction is doing more work than it sounds like it's doing. Having a purpose means it's something you bring somewhere, something you build, give, contribute. Being your purpose means the world owns you through it. One of those versions produces something. The other produces burnout and a person nobody wants to spend time with because they've played one note very loud for a very long time. The practical summary 3 steps, in order. Stop performing the search and start doing things. 1 day, 90 days, no evaluation of whether it's the right thing. You're collecting data, not finding a destination. Once you have data, run it through the Ikigai questions honestly, not aspirationally, honestly. Where, where what you found actually interest, where what you found actually interesting meets what you're actually good at and what actually needs doing. Then adopt an identity built around what you find. Present tense, not a goal, who you are today in this decision. And this is a bit anticlimactic, but isn't. Then, and this is the bit that sounds anticlimactic but isn't, build a life around the purpose, not inside it. Keep the relationships, keep the rest, keep something in your life that has nothing to do with the work. Camus pushed the boulder and found meaning in it, but the man also ate dinner sometimes. The meaningful and the mundane have to coexist. The people who figure out that still build the people who figure out that out the people who figure that out are still building something 20 years later. The ones who don't are the stories other people try to explain why they're scared to commit to anything. Most people will never find their purpose. You knew that before this started. I said it in the first 30 seconds. The question was whether you're one of them. That's not decided by talent or luck or whether the universe has something planned for you specifically. It's decided by whether you're honest enough to actually look, willing enough to actually start, and smart enough to not let the things you find become the thing that finishes you. You've been watching videos about purpose long enough, this one included. Close it and go find yours.